we're here again for another, what I know will be great, Dance Mama in Conversation. And today it's with Simone Muller-Lotz. I'm thrilled to be speaking to her today because I know she's got so much inspiring and important information to share with us that you're really going to love. Simone is currently the Dance Support and Programs Officer at Dancers Career Development, and if you don't know that organisation, you jolly well should, and I want you to go and check them out as soon as you've finished listening or watching this. And Simone also has her own Pilates business, Simone Muller Pilates, which I believe, I'm sure she'll touch on it, but will be going online more so in the new year. Simone was born in Cape Town, South Africa, and moved to the UK to study dance. And while she was at the Royal Ballet School, she was introduced to Pilates. And in overcoming a back injury, she learned firsthand about the benefits of the technique. She danced with Northern Ballet Theatre and then returned to South Africa and danced as a soloist with Cape Town City Ballet, Free Flight Dance Company and Cape Dance Company. During that time, because Simone doesn't like to do things by halves, she trained in Pilates mat work and equipment and also taught in a popular studio in Cape Town. Relocating back to London in our fantastic Olympic year, 2012, where have those days gone? She has been teaching Pilates at many studios in central London whilst continuing to perform. She's a certified body control Pilates instructor and also has a BA honours in psychology. As well as being a mum, Simone is really excited to be helping other mums get back to stability in their bodies after the journey of childbirth. And I'm just so thrilled to be talking to her about her own primary experience, but as well as someone else who's using their own experience to really help other people in similar situations. So welcome, Simone.
Thank you. Big intro.
I know. I always like to give it a full enchilada so everybody knows everything they possibly can. So tell us a bit about the context of your work at the moment and environment and kind of how things are with you, and obviously bearing in mind we are still in COVID times.
Yeah. So I started working for DCD the first week of lockdown, which was really, I feel like I went straight in with 2 kids at home, a lot of juggling. And I think in a way, maybe with everything happening online, I found I was fitting in loads more than I probably would in normal times. But at some point I realized actually that is probably not a good thing because I think I can tend to slightly overdo my schedule. So yeah, it's been, I think, slowly through the year, I've learned how to manage that a little better, not take on as many one-to-ones possibly with teaching in the evenings. And also, I guess there's this stress of getting the kids down. I think my husband's probably borne the brunt of most of that, of keeping them quiet whilst being on call. So it's definitely been challenging. And I think in a sense, maybe being a parent has changed the amount of work that I want the kids to see, because I noticed that they were starting to talk about, please don't go onto your computer, please don't do any more yoga. They kind of, they were really aware of what was going on behind the scenes. So I think that's been, in terms of COVID, I think that's what's been going on as a parent. Yeah, and I know, having spoken to others, I think they've been in the same thing.
Just remind us kind of what ages your children are at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So my eldest is 5, so he's in his 2nd year at school, and my youngest is, she very correctly says 2 3/4, so she'll be 3 in January. So they've, it's been a tough year for everyone, hasn't it? But I think they're really aware of work more so than having to leave and come back. It's kind of everything's happening here. So I'm currently putting together an online offering for the postnatal rehabilitation work that I do. And again, their sitting room has been turned into a recording studio. So there's a lot going on. So that's an exciting new development, which I think, again, is a product of what's happened this year. And what I've found is that moms don't necessarily want to come out and do a class, even when we had the possibility of doing in-person classes. One of the classes I teach is at 8 p.m. and they're much happier to log on Zoom and do the class and then, you know, turn over into bed. So in some ways it's really changed the model of my work. Also because now with doing one-to-ones on Zoom, people can come to me from all over the country. So that's changed too in terms of access. So in some ways it's actually, I think it's possibly made a positive spin on access, which was definitely a barrier before. I've kind of fitted in more work, I'd say, which I'm aware is really not everyone's situation. So I'm glad to have been able to do that in helping more people. I just have to manage that a little bit. Yeah.
I think there's nothing so productive as a dance mama, I believe, a dance papa. It absolutely. I'm certainly also one of those parents who does prefer to do class, because I think it just takes away on Zoom. Sorry, it takes away a little bit of that stress of getting them down, getting your stuff together, getting in the car. It really maximizes actually the potential of what we can do, but equally it's so important to have that social contact as well. But I think having the option to do either is really vital, and plus the childcare as well. I mean, for quite a lot of the time when my children were young, up into this year, my husband travelled quite a bit, and that absolutely has been a barrier in terms of my own personal progress, getting kind of reacquainted with the motherhood body, because of just not having the childcare there to really go to things. So like you say, there are absolutely positives.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'd say, I've done a few yoga classes in person in the studio, kind of either in between lockdowns or since the last one. And it is a really good reminder to me that Zoom is different, that it's not the same thing. And as much as, the convenient factor is absolutely there, but I think it's really, as you say, it's important for us to connect still. And I think that's, it's important to remember that we can't replace it completely, that we do still need interaction. And I think especially coming from a dance background where touch is so important,
yes,
it feels really like a different thing online. So I think balance is still important in it.
All those sort of nuances of communication, even now, as you just sort of see me at the top of my head, not the rest of my body, all of those things. But I think also when we're in this space, the kind of reading of our kind of energy and mood and all of that kind of feedback absolutely is wildly diminished. But as you say, the convenience, I think, particularly with new parents, and I keep saying to people, the whole world has gone into globally has gone into mat leave, essentially. There's lots of parallels at those times where the logistics and the possibility of getting connected, it's a really great way for us to harness. So we're going to go back in time a little bit more now, a few years, 5 years, for when you became pregnant, and kind of what support did you feel you had at that time?
I think being freelance, it was quite tricky. I was actually doing a project with Martin Joyce at the British Museum, and I literally peed on a stick in the toilets at the museum. I'd done a test in the morning and had like a really faint line, and I wasn't sure what that meant. So I'd got another digital test, and and I was literally doing, I think we did like 3 shows a day, and I was leading a group of dancers down like the white marble stairs and just feeling completely crazy and disorientated. I think and that kind of set the tone a bit, that I felt a little bit, didn't obviously want to tell too many people early on. I had just been offered a contract for a 3-month project And I kind of also felt like I needed to be absolutely sure that this pregnancy was viable before I mentioned it. But at the same time, didn't want to let people down. I felt like it was quite difficult to navigate, I think, being freelance, because those contracts were hard to come by. So then, do you want to say anything too soon? And then what happens if actually not everything's okay? All those things. So I went through that. I was performing up until, I think it was like 8 weeks or so. So it's really nauseous, or going through all of that. I was doing a performance with Thimbalelo in South Africa, which was a piece we'd created. So we kind of managed to modify it slightly, which I have to say, performing pregnant felt really magical, despite being super nauseous. So kind of after that, I just decided actually the nausea was pretty bad my whole pregnancy, and it wouldn't have worked. So I pulled out of the contract, and I knew, that it wouldn't be a process. I was actually having some mentoring with Kerry Nichols, which really helped. And we kind of really discussed at length whether it was worth going for that contract or not. And in retrospect, it was absolutely the right decision to pull out. So I did that, and I focused on teaching. And then, so straight afterwards, my life had dramatically changed. So we actually moved the day I went into labor, which is, a story for another time. But I very much felt like everything had shifted. And I think also being like really immersed in motherhood, all our families in South Africa. So it was us, and it was kind of making sense of this little person who, we didn't have the manual for, and all of that. So yeah, I think with that, I didn't feel there was space for me to go back into dance. And I felt quite ready to let that go. I did one project though. I did almost, in a sense, I think it was for me to see what it would be like. And it was exactly what I'd thought of, too much of a juggle, like in terms of childcare, in terms of getting back into fitness. It was like that ship had sailed, and I didn't feel like I wanted to stress my life out so much with having started to establish some teaching work and then needing to find cover and all of that drama. I just didn't want that. So yeah, I think from there I was able to go, okay, this is a new chapter. And I was really lucky to have a fantastic network of new moms that, would literally move to a new area with not knowing anyone, but very quickly we kind of set up a new community and network. So that really, I think, shaped that next year quite a lot.
Yeah, I think social capital, and it's something that Parents in Performing Arts campaign talks about in their reporting as well. It's just so important, and quite often when you're following a vocation such as ours, you move away from your family, and particularly in your case, completely moving country. Even in my case, my parents, a couple of hours up the road, but it's enough distance that it's a big distance. That really can impact, and building that kind of network around you is so important. Also, just sort of touching on the freelance aspect of it, which again really resonates with me, particularly with my first pregnancy, and as well have talking to other parents who are in larger, long established companies. I think there is a real marked difference in terms of the level of support and access that you feel in a established company versus what you feel as a freelancer. And I'm really hoping that the work that we're all doing will really help to change that for future freelancers, because certainly from my perspective, I feel like my recovery is still ongoing, and like my youngest is 4. So it's like never ending kind of.
Yeah, well, I think that once postnatal, always postnatal absolutely holds. And in a sense, with the women that I work with, like if it doesn't get done straight away afterwards, well, then it has to happen at some point. Like it's not over. Yeah, and I totally relate to that. I think even in terms of potentially going back into dance, I remember kind of working out the logistics of if I had to go and do a class, that would have cost like £50 with childcare.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I don't feel any class could be the value of £50 at that point. The whole thing felt too tricky. And I think you're right. I think with not having a network of family support around, it just makes it feel quite serious, especially at that point when Zach, my eldest, wasn't in childcare yet. I felt like, am I going to really put him with someone else so that I can go do class? And I wasn't I think with my second was really different. But with my first, I didn't feel that. I didn't feel ready to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the questions I usually sort of ask around this topic is kind of, was there anything that might not have been in place that you felt could have been useful? But I guess in this situation, I kind of pose that as, if there was a class that you could have gone to and taken him along, would that have been something that you would have liked to have done? Or do you feel kind of...
Yeah, I think I would have, because I think it often struck me that the bit that made that year hard was that even if I wasn't going to perform, class had been such a part of my life that I almost, I never really knew where I was. It was quite an interesting, so much had changed. And even if I'd had just class to kind of root me, that would have then made the rest of the day feel easier. So yeah, absolutely. I think if there was a place that had childcare and the possibility of a class, I think that would have changed it a lot. And it was something I contemplated, but it never, rocking up to Pineapple with your baby, would that?
Well, that's on the list, isn't it? That's on the list of attitudes we would love to change in future. I guess sort of just in terms of the physicality of that, of pregnancy and postnatal, do you feel like being a dancer and having that training changed your kind of experience or approach to pregnancy and recovery?
Yes and no. I think I had an idea of, I'm gonna be fine in pregnancy and kind of sail through postnatal, and that was not the experience. So as I said, I was super nauseous. And again, you kind of have this idea of I'm gonna be eating organic broccoli, and my child's gonna have the best nutrition possible. And meanwhile, if I managed to eat anything, it was great. It was just so super nauseous. So that already changed the tone of it, because I was like, oh, actually, I'm not able to do stuff that I thought I would be able to do. And then postnatal was again really interesting, because I kind of assumed, my abdominals had always been quite strong. I was going to come out of this and, not have to work too hard to get abdominals back. And I've got such a strong memory of leaving the hospital and going oh, hold on, I still look pregnant. How, a lot came out. he was kind of average size. There was definitely a lot of other stuff that came out, and I still look pregnant. I don't understand what's happened. So I think it was really interesting to experience that, to go oh, you mean the baby comes out and your stomach doesn't go flat like that? That's, I think, maybe a lie that's sold slightly.
I totally agree. And I think also there's a lot of emphasis on the birth and then tumbleweed on straight after. Loads on feeding, loads on that. But the kind of, in terms of the expectations to have or for yourself that are realistic on your body and kind to yourself, I totally agree, and I feel very much the same. That was something missing. That was hang on a minute, what's going on here?
Totally. And also in a way, I felt, I remember even a few months postpartum, being I can't actually pull in my stomach. Even if I wanted to, there's some kind of connection that's been cut, and that felt really foreign. That felt like I was somehow inhabiting a different body, and that felt really hard in the context of maybe, just being with general other moms who maybe didn't care as much about that, which is totally kind of what I think is right. But as a dancer, that felt very foreign. It felt, in terms of identity, that felt very foreign as well. It's kind of then what led me to kind of research this more, because I was teaching postnatal Pilates, and I wasn't convinced that I was actually getting results, not only with other moms, but with myself as well. And I felt there's something missing here. Like this doesn't feel, that what worked before doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And I was kind of really intrigued with why is this body so different? Like this doesn't feel, pushing it in the same way doesn't feel appropriate anymore.
Yeah. And tell us more about that, because we were speaking only a couple of weeks ago about a rehabilitation practice that you've trained in and that you work with. And as somebody who, hands up, absolutely has had diastasis recti with both children, I am utterly fascinated by this. But I know that lots of other women out there will also be really interested, and particularly for us who work physically with our body, whether you're performing or rehearsal directing or teaching choreographing or whatnot, or just simply doing class for yourself and enjoying that movement. I think that it's so drummed into you to have a strong core, to then have that that option taken away from you temporarily. There's a lot of myth around it won't go back, and we talked about that between ourselves. But yeah, just tell us more about that, because it is going to give hope to a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's interesting to know, like, I think generally postnatal, the emphasis is on pelvic floor. So like your midwife's telling you to continuously contract your pelvic floor. And as dancers, I think there's some understanding of pelvic floor, but maybe not entirely. Like I don't think it's properly broken down. So there's that one aspect of pelvic floor.
Yeah.
Then there's the aspect of prolapse, which is way more common again than is discussed, and quite a scary place. I think there's this idea of your body being really broken.
Yes.
And how to fix that. Like that feels really complicated, and going down the road of potentially surgery, all that kind of stuff, that feels, again, a lot for a new mom to take. And then there's diastasis. So diastasis, is gone. The thinking has very much moved away from how big is your gap. Like that was the paranoia, is how big is your gap, and is that gap ever going to close? And actually, when you look at quite a defined abdominal six-pack, even pre-birth, you'll probably see a gap. Like it's normal to have a gap. That's not the issue. The issue is the tone of that gap. So when that connective tissue gets stretched as your bump grows, that tension can really change. And depending on a whole lot of variables, which I don't feel are completely understood, why some people get it and why some people don't, that tension doesn't necessarily come back. And that's what we've got to look at, is why is that tension not coming back, and what do you need to do to help that? And the thing that doesn't necessarily help is all the traditional stuff. So, all the sit-ups and all the planks can make it worse, because you're now just strengthening the muscles separated. And actually what we need to do is bring that connection tone back so that we can transfer forces. So not necessarily in bringing the abdominals closer together. It's that if that integrity is strong in that connective tissue, then you have more of a 360 core rather than a space with no integrity. Yeah.
And I think it's also really important to emphasize here, we are absolutely talking about functional abdominals rather than anything aesthetic that we are fed incorrectly, I'm going to say incorrectly, from the media, and people who whip back into shape, like Kate Middleton, for example. Apologies, Kate, if I meet you in the future. Maybe I will. But I feel kind of the messaging around her quick return to a particular size, also, kind of forgetting that she's royal and has an even bigger support network than possible, and lots of, nutritionists and personal trainers and nannies, and again, not saying that's right or wrong. I think, anyway, yes, we're talking more about function, to actually be in the space and being able to move safely and effectively.
Yeah. And part of that is that if we think of the core as this 360 unit, then if there is a kind of a part of that that's not functioning well, then the workload is going to go elsewhere. And usually that comes with back issues. So that's where it will kind of materialize, or pelvic floor issues. So the importance of it absolutely is not an aesthetic thing, it's a function thing. Because also you're then throwing into lifting a really heavy car seat and holding a child a lot. So it's not like your workload has, if anything, it might have increased slightly in a different way, that you're holding, you know, a little baby that gets heavy quite quickly. So for sure, it's function. And that's, you know, in terms of both diastasis and prolapse, the function is so important, because I see a lot of women with prolapse. It's probably the biggest reason that women come to me. And that's, you know, it's a confusing time, and it's a hard emotional time anyway when you're knackered, and now you've got to consider all these other things of, you know, am I going to make it to the bathroom in time? You know, why is my body looking like this, and why am I feeling so uncomfortable? So that, you know, and I guess the thing to say is that there is help, and there's possibility to change all of that. I think also important to say is that whether you're going back into dance or you're not going back into dance, your body, having been a dancer, is used to so much movement. And it's something I only really pieced together afterwards, having not really gone back into dance, is that I don't think my flexibility will ever be the same again, which I'm okay with. But if I did want to go back into it at some point, like that period after, it feels important for yourself to feel comfortable in like your tone and range, to have some kind of I want to say routine, but maybe that's the wrong word, just some space for you to kind of use your physicality. Because I think it's the repetitive nature of motherhood that makes, you know, your hamstrings the tightest they've ever been. And yeah, so that kind of also, I just think that space of having space in your own body, especially if that's something you're used to, it feels important. And I didn't always honor that. Yeah.
And I think the education around it, isn't it, that there are kind of there's issues that Safe in Dance, Adele Quinn, Sonia Rafferty and Charlotte Tomlinson's dance science textbook touches on. Again, there's a link to that on the Dance Mama website. But as well as kind of the stomach muscle issue, there's also kind of forward head and shoulder shape from feeding and carrying, your rib cage size changing, conditions like pubis symphysis, as well as lordosis, and all of these things that, and the effects of relaxing on your joints, particularly if you continue breastfeeding, that I really feel we, and I hope with the work that we're doing, we can kind of educate people further earlier in the pipeline. I hate that phrase, but to kind of really be aware of those things, as well as the kind of cultural issues around being a parent in dance. But for their own safety, and a couple of anecdotal reports that I've had is that there's been rib dislocation in the studio whilst dancers have been breastfeeding again, and that feels like a very specific issue that is not being fully understood by anybody. And there's a real duty of care from employers, as well as for the dancers themselves, to look after themselves and be looked after. And
yeah,
a lot of work to do, haven't we, ahead of us, to really kind of fully comprehend what all of that means and how we can be supported. What was the biggest change for you on your kind of return to work on a personal level?
I think it was interesting, because I think I had a whole year off with my son, and as you know, all my NCT friends were returning back to work, and you know, lawyers and civil servants and those kind of jobs. It really was apparent to me, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out. I need to work out what I'm going to do. And I, you know, I said I took a whole year off. Actually, I didn't. I started teaching a bit, probably about 4 or 5 months in. But I just still wasn't sure exactly how I was going to make this a full career, and knowing myself needing to do lots of things, which I recognize as my pattern. I knew I kind of wanted to do other things. It was actually, I chatted to Ellen at DCD at the alumni event, and I very randomly said to her, I think I'm going to work for DCD. I don't know why I think that, but I do. And from that, I started a project for them. And it kind of, that started the ball rolling in terms of how to make I now, this word portfolio career, I guess there's something in that. And that's where I thrive, is when I've got kind of different things going on. It does, I'll say, create quite a chaotic existence. And at times I'm okay with that. And at times I feel, I did a yoga teacher training this year as well, in the mix of lockdown and everything else, which, it felt like I was slightly tipping the edge into this is too much. But equally, I feel probably inspired and grow more when I have that. And, it's an interesting place as a mom, because at the end of that training, I felt a little bit, no one could have predicted this year was happening. And this was the year I chose to do a teacher training, which I've thought about for years. And I said, there's times I think as a mom, maybe I can't do it all, which is not something that really comes into my mind a lot. I don't consider that. I just kind of do it. But then after the fact, when things feel really chaotic, I kind of go like, oh, hold on, I do have 2 small kids. Like, maybe that's why this is really chaotic. But it's not really something that stops me, I wouldn't say. Yeah. So in terms of like how parenthood affects things, I think it's almost that thing of like, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. It's that a bit. It's like, well, we'll just make it work somehow. And by the skin of our teeth, we'll get to school on time, and you'll kind of be looking like you've got your uniform on, all that kind of stuff. So, there's for sure, there's definitely that part of it that always feels slightly on the edge of we've got it sorted to we don't at all. And then I guess also it's the dynamic of the family, right? So, in all the different stages and phases, how the kids are doing, and what that then brings into the family dynamic, and how on top of it I am or not. But one thing I'd say with it is, I think because I work, especially, in my teaching work, I work with moms, that changes the tone completely, because we all understand each other, and we all understand kind of where things are. And not to say it's unprofessional, it's more just that there's a real understanding. When I'm teaching at 8:00, fortunately, I've been able to log on time, but absolutely many are late. And that's just, the nature of what's going on with family life. So, yeah, I think it gives me more empathy, I would say.
Yeah, I think definitely this period has. And I really hope that is being retained with people who don't have children, as well as those who do. And we're kind of seeing some of that legacy still happening, and with others, unfortunately, not. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think that kind of wanting to live a full life is a really positive, valid thing. And I absolutely believe we can have it all, but yeah, sometimes you can't have it all at the same time. Is more kind of, I guess, how I kind of settle it, because I too, Simone, like to keep myself busy. And I think, again, there's another, I think that is a dancer trait of wanting to feel fulfilled, and there's definitely a need to feel artistically filled, as well as physically fulfilled, as well as that maternal and other parts of your life fulfillment, and kind of making all of that work at times absolutely is really overwhelming. But as you say, having the support from other parents, and where we are now in kind of the history of mankind, that empathy is really important, because I think a lot of the challenges around being a parent and having trained in dance is that you have to give over to something else, and the children supersede where dance has been like number one and everything else has come second. There's something else more important, or as important for some people. And I think that acknowledgement is a big thing, again, for dancers and dance practitioners and their employers. And I think we're making some inroads in that, but there's definitely more work to be done. I would definitely say as well, and I will let you speak, that you're a role model. I think those of us who are choosing to work or are working are a role model to our children. And as much as you said, sometimes that can be, you know, put that down now, mum, it's also, I think, really valid that they see that, and don't just kind of categorize us in a domestic role, and that is all there is. I think I try and remind myself of of that when
which is lucky, because I'm a really rubbish cook, right? So that would not have worked.
So we've talked about sort of parenting influencing your work. Sort of kind of the opposite of that is, how does your work influence your parenting?
It's a difficult question. I think it has made me more, especially working with women who have had some trauma, have had difficulties, early motherhood. I think it's given me more empathy again. So maybe that empathy works both ways. Yes. Because I think I acknowledge how hard it can be. And, you know, I've started doing some in-person classes recently, again, coming out of this lockdown. And it's so apparent these moms need to get out. Like they've had a rough time in spending so much time indoors. I can't imagine what they've been through. You know, I think there are some positives in not having that pressure to get out and to be doing it all, for sure, in that fourth trimester, but and continued. But then on the other hand, I think of the times when I just needed to get out, like that would have really been a change in my day, having been able to get out. So yeah, I can see that, and can see kind of where they at with kind of navigating those early days. But it's a good reminder. I mean, it's interesting as well, because the postnatal class can be really loud. And I almost forget how loud babies are, you know, even 8, you know, which is less numbers than we used to have. Yeah, they're loud. And that I think I've come back to my own kids with really wanting to be with them. And I guess the same with work. I feel, you know, it's that thing of having my own thing then makes me come back to my family a little bit more open. I did a workshop the other day around mindful motherhood, I think it was called. And she was talking about how, with the kids being so exposed to how much work we do, kind of really trying to not do that multitasking thing, and kind of when they are asking to be with you, kind of being like, I'm going to push that phone away. It's just me and you. There's no more phone. There's no more computer. And that's really, I found that's changed. That I then, even if it's just also for myself, to go like, okay, stop. Like, you can't do it all. You can't be with them and be answering an email at the same time. It's just impossible. And it's definitely, that line feels easier to uphold when I do that. So yeah, it's been my lesson for 2020. Yeah.
I also feel you strike me as the kind of person, because you are doing a lot, actually you're able to do a lot because you have that boundary. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of work time, and this is parenting time. And definitely, yeah, I completely agree. That's something that I try to do as much as possible. Sometimes that doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
But I kind of try to be kind to myself, of like, actually, those moments, particularly this year, actually, are fewer and further between than when I was kind of, you know, doing the drop off and commuting to London and back again, which now feels quite crazy. And I think as we perhaps move into the next phase with a vaccine being present and things, I don't want to say returning back to normal, because I think we've left that. There's no normal. I think we've left that behind. But moving to the next phase where we have more interaction, I wonder how, you know, that kind of transition will work for people, and how much they'll actually want to do that. But just going back to sort of the connection in person and having that time, there's also I think it's creating the space, isn't it, for new mums particularly, where even if they can't engage in the activity at the time because it's happened to me. You go to a class, you make all that effort, and they want to feed the entire time, making sure that those women don't, or dads don't feel like it's a waste, that just because they haven't got fed the yoga or Pilates or dance bit, that time in a different location with people is hugely valuable, and getting them to recognize that. And I'm sure you absolutely are one of those. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's also, I think it's an interesting thing, because I think there's also that element of like, why is my baby the one crying? Which happens for sure a lot in classes. In the classes that I used to, well, pre-COVID, there was actually someone helping with the babies, which was amazing, because then actually moms could, unless they were feeding, could join in. But I think that's, you know, it's an interesting thing as well, because I think there's so much at play there of, what kind of wanting to be doing what's best for your baby, and then also having a bit of like, well, I came to do this class because I want to do some stuff for myself. The yoga teacher that I did my training with, Naomi Anand, she is, I feel like she's a bit of a master at doing yoga with her kids around. It's something I don't feel like I've completely embraced, because I feel like I do need to cut off, and which is obviously easier once the kids are older. But it's something I've realized I almost can't necessarily do yoga at home anymore, because or when they are at home, because I feel like I need that time to myself to properly engage. And I think that's, you know, it's a bit of an echo of those early days, because I think it's a really hard thing. Like, we wired to react to every single noise we hear. So it's very hard for moms to actually be present in those classes, because they just, and I know it for myself, I was, even if my kids were okay, I was waiting for them to not be okay. So I think that's it. You know, it's a hard space to really have time for yourself, which is why, as part of the thinking with this online content, is that you could do it when you have time, rather than, you know, and I think maybe that's one of the things that COVID has kind of given us, is that we can do stuff at home on our own, which is more empowering in a sense, around times when, you know, when babies are sleeping. And
I think as well, kind of the accountability of doing classes live, because yes, a lot of, as we talked about, the nuance, person to person is lost, but you have got somebody there that you may probably have met before, maybe not, but usually there's already that relationship set up, hopefully, that you do feel that accountability. I think dancers are kind of driven to kind of do a workout on a nap or something like that, again with all the anxiety of sleep roulette brings. How long have I got before I get interrupted? But absolutely, I think being able to access something high quality, which I found, I think at that stage in my parenthood, not so easy. I mean, I would scour the internet to try and find things, which is absolutely why I curated the online class program, to just kind of get those quick links, because when you're in a quick panic and you know you've just got them down and you could have, as well as spending like 10 minutes like brainstorming the 800 things that you could be doing, which eats into that time, if you think, right, this day I'm going to try and do a workout or get into that, then you've got a quicker link. And absolutely, obviously we will be linking up with Simone's work to make sure that can be accessed as readily. But Simone, you're doing just such fantastic, phenomenal work. I know, absolutely, I want to tap into it more on my quest to get into things a bit easier. I guess 2 last questions. What keeps you motivated to dovetail your work with your parenthood and this time of your life?
I think you touched on it, that it is modeling for the kids what's possible to do, and to be fulfilled, and to be able to juggle it all somehow. But I think also what it probably became more apparent once I took on the DCD role, is that all the work I'm doing is very much supported care work. And I think there's that element of me that's probably always been there. When I was with Cape Town City Ballet, I started a wellness program because there was no company physio. So that's kind of always, I'm an Aquarian. There's that I want to help. And I think probably with the postnatal work, it's been very, I've been able to do deep work with that, which has felt really rewarding. So I think there's I kind of believe in fulfillment, right? That we're here to do things. And I think for the kids, that's important to see that too.
Yeah. Amazing. Simone, thank you so much for just everything. It's just your generosity in sharing your story, and just some really vital information that we talked about this before, that really just kind of busting these myths. And I know there's lots of effort that is going on out there now with obviously I can't fail to mention Active Pregnancy Foundation and their Chief Medical Officer got activity guidelines for the general populace, but in particular for the dancing mother population. You're doing such amazing things, and obviously the work of DCD too is hugely vital and really important, and just goes, I think, to show people who don't work in dance or haven't had it touch their life in the same way, of how the power of it is just so great for so many different populations of people and for everyone. And just thank you for everything you're doing, and I can't wait to amplify more of it in 2021. It's really important.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simone. Take care.
You too.